I'm the moderator. We will be getting started in just a minute or two, so just settle on in and we will get rolling shortly. And as a reminder, if you are not a speaker today, we ask that you turn off your cameras to help us save some bandwidth for our presenters and panelists, and also help us out as we also are very fortunate to have an ASL interpreter today with the panel. All right. Welcome everyone. We're continuing to have people arrive. If you've just arrived, we'll be starting in just a moment. My name is Amy Anda. I'm the moderator. We ask that if you've just joined us and you're not on the panel or our ASL interpreter, that you go ahead and make sure your camera is turned off so we can conserve bandwidth and also help us spotlight our speakers and panelists. And also mute yourself so we can control some of the background noise. All right. So we're just past 3 o'clock, so we're just going to get started. My name is Amy Anda, and I am fortunate to be your moderator today. This session is being recorded, and we welcome you to this virtual event celebrating the 20th anniversary of Artomatic. This is the pandemic publishing workshop hosted by Elizabeth James, but also joined by some amazing panelists, which I'll let you know all about here. Before we start, I just want to go over just a few things. Please mute yourself so we don't get any background noise. Please, again, turn off your camera in order to save bandwidth for the presenter. If you have any questions as we go along, please go ahead and type them into the chat box. And we'll, if it's something that you're struggling with, I'll do my best to assist you behind the scenes. But also we'll be queuing up some questions. Please keep in mind that the chat box is considered a public space. Please, as I said, keep in mind that the session is being recorded, and we expect all participants to be respectful and follow instructions so we have the best workshop experience possible. I'll also be putting up in the chat as we go along some instructions for how to also isolate and see our ASL interpreter, Lanette, who's joining us, and very fortunate to have her. And also I'll be putting up info about the virtual tip jars in case you'd like to recognize or thank some of the panel here for sharing their experience and expertise with us. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Elizabeth to get us going.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. And thank you, firstly, to Artomatic for hosting us. Artomatic is also accepting donations. So if you want to thank these guys for putting together an incredible slate of programming over the last few weeks, please show your appreciation with a tip. Okay. So we are talking about publishing during a pandemic. The group of us today, there are 5 of us. We're all from a small press called the Santa Fe Writers Project. And our press has managed to stay afloat not only during the pandemic, but they've been around for over 20 years. And so we're going to be talking about what it's like in the publishing industry today, what it's like publishing with a small press, and also for authors, what are ways that you can sell books and maintain your career even during the worst of times. I just wanted to talk briefly before I introduced everybody just about kind of some things going on in the publishing industry today. Yes, sales are down. Bookstores have been laying off employees, and publishers have been in kind of a state of panic, but also the pandemic is kind of the cap to a trend that's been going on for a long time of a lot of small presses closing and a lot of larger presses consolidating operations. And it's just the industry has been in flux for a really long time. So we're going to be talking about that. But not everything is horrible. Ebook sales are up, audiobook sales are up, and book deals are still getting made every day. So with that in mind, I'm going to start introducing our speakers. Anita Perez Sawyer is the author of the memoir, Smoking Cigarettes, Eating Glass, which came out from SFWP in 2015. She's the winner of the 2013 Santa Fe Writers Project Literary Awards Program Nonfiction Grand Prize. A psychologist in practice for almost 40 years, she's a member of the clinical faculty at Yale Medical School. Her work has appeared in both professional and literary journals. Her essays have won prizes and twice been included among the notables in the Best American Essays series. Using herself as a case study, Anita speaks to clinical audiences around the country. Her talks, essays, and stories illuminate lifetime consequences of childhood trauma, harmful effects of fads in psychiatric diagnosis and treatment, the enduring impact of stigma and shame, and the power of human connection to heal. Her book is Smoking Cigarettes, Eating Glass, a memoir of triumph over mental illness, and it's available now from sfwp.com. Secondly, we have Ted O'Connell. Ted O'Connell is the winner of the Tobias Wolff Award in Fiction. He's a writer and musician whose creative products have been featured in literary magazines, taverns, and music halls throughout the country. He plays mandolin with the Prozac Mountain Boys and guitar with the Scarlet Locomotive, and has twice served as a visiting professor in China. K, a novel, is his first book. K is a harrowing tale about a man wrongly accused of a crime and imprisoned in communist China, and it is also available now at sfwp.com. A. Balaskovitz is the author of Magic for Unlucky Girls and the forthcoming Strange Folk You'll Never Meet, both out from SFWP. Her stories and essays have appeared in Story, the Missouri Review, Indiana Review, OK Donkey, and others. She is the co-editor-in-chief of Cartridge Lit, and she's on Twitter at AABALASKOVITS. Her book, Magic for Unlucky Girls, is a collection of 14 fantastical stories, and it is available now on sfwp.com. Lindsay C Berry is our children's author. She developed her love of reading and writing at a young age, and even more so when she stumbled upon a magical world called Narnia. She's a graduate of Pennsylvania State University and has worked in advertising and executive search. But her first love has always been writing and education. Her mother, an English, drama, and creative writing teacher, made sure that Berry's love for the literary world was deeply ingrained from a young age. She lives in the Washington, D.C. area with her husband, 2 sons, 2 cats, 2 guppies with ever-changing names, 1 red betta fish named Goldie, a blue budgie named Ice Dragon, and a yellow budgie named Goldie. Sense a theme? Her sons inspire her life and writing every single day. Find her at www.lberrybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at lberrybooks. Her books Journey to Constellation Station and The Backpack are available now on sfwp.com. And me, I'm Elizabeth Gonzalez James. My stories and essays have appeared in the Idaho Review, the Rumpus, Plowshares blog, and elsewhere, and have received numerous Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominations. My first novel, Mona at Sea, was a finalist in the 2019 SFWP Literary Awards, judged by Carmen Maria Machado, and is forthcoming September of 2021. Okay, so my first question is, I would like to ask our panelists if they could talk a little bit about their experience of publishing with SFWP during the pandemic. Can we start with you, Anita? Anita, are you there?
Okay. It's been challenging, but I think the thing about a small publisher is that when I sort of wonder what to do, I just email Andrew, and he offers me some comforting words and a little humor, and then I go back to coping with the pandemic.
Okay, so you're saying that one advantage of being with a small press during the pandemic is accessibility?
Yes, it's
Okay.
remarkable, given what I've heard about large presses.
Okay, Ted, how about you? Ted, we can't hear you.
I am now unmuted. Sorry about that. I wanted to go back to what Anita said about large presses because, this is my first rodeo. It's my first case, my first book, and my experience has been very positive with SFWP. But I wonder if I could kind of, at the risk of opening up another question, I'm curious, have people heard about what's going on in, the world of the larger presses? Because Anita, you mentioned that in some cases people are having, tough experiences in those presses.
I'm speaking generalizations, though. I don't. Yeah. I just know they don't feel like they get attention.
Yeah, I've gotten that sense too. This is also my first book, so I don't have a ton of experience working with a big press. But yeah, I think the smaller the roster, the easier it is to have direct access to your editor or your publisher. For instance, we're all on a Slack channel with Andrew Gifford, who runs SFWP, and so literally, if we have a question, we can just ask it like that day. Yeah, so accessibility, I think, is a big part of it. Ted, I don't know like you asked about larger presses. What is your sense? Do you have colleagues who are with bigger presses? Like, do you get a sense of what their experience has been?
I thought about this panel earlier today, and I wanted to really think about, okay, what can I say that'd be helpful to other writers? And I think if there's one thing people might take away, it's that it doesn't matter if you're with a huge press, if you're with Norton, you're with Knopf, or a small press, that if you aren't active, your book will die. You know what I mean? And I've heard that many times from many other authors who've published a lot more than me. So my sense is that Santa Fe Writers Project is a pretty good size, that we're small enough that we have that kind of family sense. We're all helping each other. We have accessibility to Andrew and to, graphic design folks and this sort of thing. But that we wouldn't want to be too small. I mean, some of the really small presses, some of them have basically, had to cease operations, So I guess that's kind of my sense right now. I'm sure as we talk more, I'll get more ideas and maybe spew a little bit more wisdom. But basically, I think the message from me is hang in there, stay active in many different ways that we can. I'm sure we'll talk about that, and that, we'll be okay.
Allison, did you want to talk about this, about what your experience has been publishing during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, my second book, I signed the contract right before the pandemic, which of course is just an extra bit of anxiety, and it's not coming out until the following October, so there's a bit of time. Maybe this will end, but who knows. So sort of like getting in the correct mindset for it has been strange. But as everyone has said, the accessibility that Andrew offers, he's not only does he sort of like wait for us to contact him, but he's constantly giving us, tips for how to navigate social media, how to assist one another. And I think that that's something that's very unique to small presses, is that you kind of get that like hands-on attention and that kind of constant encouragement.
And Lindsay, how about you? Can you speak to your experience as a children's book author during the pandemic?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. It's great having Andrew just a text or an email or a Slack away, and everyone else too, which is pretty awesome. And it seems like Andrew, and us being a smaller press, his ability to find a different way and to be able to be flexible and pivot when he needs to pivot is an advantage too. And then just, I'm sure we'll talk about this more too, but, last year or the year before, I was going into schools, doing reading. So, it's coming up with new ideas. And I think, having that accessibility to all these awesome authors and Andrew and saying, well, what can we do now? Like, what is going to be the new way to do this? Which I'm not sure, the bigger presses, if you would have that help, I guess. So yeah, it's been, from my experience so far, it's been pretty amazing to have that line of communication open to everybody, and Andrew especially.
And then, so Lindsay, you started to talk a little bit about book promotion during the pandemic, and that was actually going to be my next question. So I'll just put it right back to you.
Okay.
What ways have you found have been the best during the pandemic at reaching your audience? And I'm interested also, because you're a children's book author, your audience is kind of bifurcated, right? Because the parents make the purchase decision, but the books are for the children. So do you have to also find ways of reaching two audiences at once?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, like you said, the parents are purchasing the books. So of course I want to speak to them, but then I also want to provide something engaging that they can, talk about and read to their children or have their children read. So it is a double audience, basically. So like I said, before I would set up, I think I've read to like over 30 schools locally and in different states. So I would, boots on the ground, like going in, talking to teachers, talking to the kids. And obviously now we really can't do that. So, I mean, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to, reach out with Skype. This is a great tool, obviously, and that kind of thing. And then also, thinking out of the box. Let me start over. So, booking on podcasts, obviously, is a great thing to do right now. I think a lot of people are doing that. And then, like I said, thinking out of the box. So my picture books are sold at the local hardware store, Twins Ace Hardware, down the street from me. Which people wouldn't really think about, but they also have really cute stocking stuffers for holidays, and they have a bunch of cute little things. So, I thought, well, why not ask them if I can sell my book in there? And they said, sure. So that's a place. So it's not just traditionally, where can I have the book? It's what else can I do? What's around me? that I can use or ask to, maybe push sales or think about it in a different way.
That's fantastic. I love that idea of thinking of book sales in terms of alternative places to put your books, like a hardware store. That's a really great idea. Allison, can you speak about what have you done during the pandemic to change up your sales strategy and try to reach your audience?
Yeah, that was a really difficult thing to grapple with, just because the nature of what I write is fairly dark, which not everyone wants right now. Everything's already kind of depressing. What I've really been focusing on is making sort of interpersonal connections with people. Because I've been home, and I've been in front of a screen for so long, I've really been trying to just sort of individually reach out to people and read their work, tell them what I admire about their work, and kind of make those connections. Because this seems a little like, I don't know, the word is not coming to me. But kind of hoping that, like, when more virtual readings happen, these are people that I can talk to about, creating these sort of like virtual readings with them, with other writers that I admire, just so that we can kind of help each other out during it. Because, even if they're not directly linked to this press, I feel that the lit community is all sort of in this together.
That's great. So that's so like increasing your professional network and making those connections and cementing those connections so that you can then do readings together and stuff like that. Great. Okay, Ted, how about you? How has this, now you debuted right in the middle of the pandemic. Your book came out May 1st. And so can you tell me, like, with book tours canceled and all that stuff, how did you have to pivot? What has your strategy been?
Okay, well, I ended up doing one live reading in Wisconsin, and I sold 4 books. So I was like, whoa, wow, yeah, like people, everyone was spaced out, everyone wore masks. I was like on a sound system, a good distance from people. So I'm maybe looking forward to seeing some more of that, maybe to do a few readings. But other than that, I've done 2 podcasts that haven't come out yet, but I've been interviewed by 2 different folks at the University of Texas, and then a guy named Matt Boatwright, who has his own podcast in LA. So that was kind of fun doing that. Those of you who know me have seen that I've done some videos, some audio, about everything I can try to do. Allison, you mentioned about being a good literary citizen. I've basically spent the summer reading peers' novels. It's kind of fun in a sense, and also an obligation. I didn't know this was going to happen when I published a book. Got all these people who I know tangentially, or new friends or old friends, and they're reading my book. All of a sudden, I got to read your book too. Right? So that's cool. I'm like, right now I'm in the middle of a book called The Jumper by Tim Parrish, a guy from the Swanee Writers Conference. Fantastic book, great book. So yeah, like you, Allison, I'm trying to make sure I'm a good literary citizen, and when I'm finished somebody's book, I say something really nice on Facebook, something like that, and hope that karma comes back,
Yeah. So, and I think, Lindsay, you mentioned podcasts too. So podcasts are a great way for authors to be able to reach new readers and to speak to people. Ted, did you do those podcasts from home, or did you travel anywhere to do them?
Both of them were from home.
From home. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Yeah. And being a good literary citizen and reading and promoting other people's books are key. That's so, so important. Also, can everybody please recognize Ted's hat, which says, is that from your book, the K on there, or?
Yeah, it's actually like, apparently it's some
okay.
horse farm in Kentucky, but my wife bought it for me. She just went out
Awesome.
and found the only hat she could find that looked halfway piece that had K on it. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay.
I do have one more thing, if that's okay. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
Lindsay.
absolutely.
When Allison was talking about, her audience and her books darker, it's one thing it reminded me too is during this time, I feel like you could lean into that a little bit and kind of just, be like, are you feeling depressed? Well, here's a book and that kind of thing. Like, kind of make it almost like we're all in this together, right? And yours, Ted, with they're in prison, and and then mine, the kids' books, it's like, I'm trying to do it in terms of parents. Like, I hear you. Like, I'm a parent. I get it right now. It's so difficult. Here's a book about kindness. Here's a book about the constellations. You can go out with your kids and look up at the night sky. It's something to do. It's an activity. So you kind of just like find that common thread that connects your books and your audience in whatever situation we're in, and use that. Try to use that and connect with people. Just something I thought of when Allison was saying, about her book being a little bit darker.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And then Anita, how about you? Have you transitioned to doing virtual events? Has your social media strategy changed at all?
I'm sort of a dinosaur social media wise, but I've had the good fortune. I was a speaker for a big trauma conference that had to go virtual. But it meant I had to record my talk. But it's the talk is mostly about sort of my story, how I got from there to here. And so it helps sell books. And then and from that I got invited to do another conference, to be interviewed at a conference that'll be in September. So I'm kind of getting out there and being, I did a question and answer discussion sort of thing for a follow-up to the trauma conference. And then I talk about these things, try to talk about them on Facebook, although I'm, the other thing, and it does seem to sell books. The other thing is that I have a blog, a Psychology Today blog. And so I've again, it's hard for me to actually get things out, but I got one out about birds and the pandemic. So that's my strategy.
Yeah, so leveraging your professional expertise and your professional network, and using that that training that you already have, and using that to supplement selling your book and kind of get yourself out there in front of a new audience.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. I wanted to know what has everybody's experience been publishing with a small press? Now, I know I can speak for myself. I haven't ever published with a big press, so I don't really know what that experience is like, but I have friends who have published with larger presses, and so I can maybe understand a little bit based on things that I've heard, and I'm in some Facebook groups with other writers and stuff. So I'm just curious, what has your experience been? What are the advantages that you see beyond accessibility, which we already talked about? What are the advantages that you see publishing with a small press versus publishing with a larger press? And Anita, can you speak to that?
I don't know that I can, because this is sort of my the total of my experience so far.
Okay. How about you, Allison?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Well, I too haven't published with a large press, though I have several friends who have and are currently going through the process. So I guess I can speak sort of how I've seen the experience differ. I know my friends who have published through large presses, they go with agents. And so there's sort of that, I've noticed kind of a block in the communication. They contact their agent who then sort of works with the editors and the marketing team and so on and so forth. So in some ways it seems like a behind the scenes game of telephone. And I think that there's a less of control for the author because there's so many voices with a large press sort of having input, whereas with a small press, obviously Andrew has at least given me input into some of his ideas for making the book better, in my opinion. But it's still ultimately like I have control over quite a lot of it, from the design, the stories themselves, the marketing. So that's sort of what I've been seeing as the big difference.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Having a lot of input in terms of, like you said, cover design, marketing strategy, audience outreach, all of that stuff. And that's really important. I've heard horror stories of other authors with big presses, like they see the cover and it's just like completely missed the mark. And I know there was I don't know if anybody else followed the stuff earlier this year with American Dirt, but the author, the publisher had created these floral centerpieces for the launch party, and they used a barbed wire motif, which was in really poor taste. And then the author, had to go on social media and say, I had nothing to do with that. I never saw that before I showed up at the party. And so it's just, there's a lot more creative control in a small press, and there's just a lot more. The author is always sitting at the table for every discussion. So Ted, how about you? Can you speak to your opinion about small press versus big press?
Well, when I was at AWP in the middle of the day, about 2 o'clock, Andrew bought me a beer. That was pretty nice. When your publisher buys you beer, and I got him back later that day. So that was still back in the old days, right? The olden days of non-pandemic. We were at actually in Texas, which now seems like kind of a dumb idea that we all went there, right? But it was a good thing we did to get a little, I hope no one got sick anyway. I guess I'll go to the speak to the cover design too, because I was definitely happy with the cover of this book, and I won't lie, it took some back and forth and some maybe not great communication on my part, and some frustration to get that cover right. But I remember, Andrew telling me a story of some, let's just say, famous writer X who didn't want to go on tour with her book because she hated the cover so much. So he's like, this is why I do this. This is why it's a messy process. And then I remember you, Elizabeth, we talked a little bit about your book, Mona at Sea, and how you have this really cool idea. I don't know if you're sticking with it, of using lottery cards, the Mexican loteria, those kind of cards. I think we're familiar with that artwork. Is that still a kind of theme that you're thinking about? Because to me, that sounded really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Those motifs did end up in the final design.
Yeah.
So also speaking to just generally getting creative input and creative control. Lindsay, how about you? I'm curious to know also about the process of illustration. What was it like working? Did you have your own illustrator that you worked with, or what was that process like?
Yeah, I started with a smaller press, an even smaller press than Santa Fe Writers Project. So kind of going backwards on your question, starting with a small press, it was great to say, I have a publisher, I'm published, but then I pretty much did everything. The person was there to help me, of course, and guide me, but the marketing, like everything, I found the illustrators, like everything. And now, working with Andrew, it's nice. It's a step up, I think, and just having access to all of you amazing authors and having Andrew, I can say that having help with marketing has been really, really great. And in terms of illustration, so the first time I found, for my first book, Journey to Constellation Station, I worked with the illustrator before when we worked in advertising. So I was just putting a bunch of feelers out. I really didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. And I just asked this person, here's the text. Would you want to illustrate this? And he said yes. And so that's how I came up with that first illustrator. And then my second book, The Backpack, I ran a contest on Instagram, actually, looking for up-and-coming talent in terms of illustrators. And the woman, Claudia, won the contest, and so I partnered with her for her amazing illustrations. So, but now that I'm, with Andrew and SFWP, he's actually, I have another book coming out, and he's found the illustrator, which is wonderful because it's one less thing that I have to do. I mean, of course, he sent me a list, and we looked at, their work and deciding, what kind of way we wanted to go in terms of what it's going to actually look like and their aesthetic. But it was great having his help to help me find people. And the one we actually are going with, she was recommended by someone else to him. So we know that she's, about her, she's recommended. So that's something I'd say is really great coming from where I'm coming from, a children's book author, is having that extra help, having someone else's eyes on it. And to help me find an illustrator. And Andrew pretty much said, when I signed on with him, he's like, you're never going to have to find your own illustrator again. And I was like, oh, that's such a relief. Like, I don't have to worry about that. So I can say that has been amazing for me, at least.
Yeah, I can imagine. There is a sweet spot between working with a micro press where you still have to shoulder a lot of the responsibility, and then working with a small press where, there is an existing infrastructure. Okay, and then I wanted to know, we spoke about podcasts, and we spoke about video content a little bit, alternative places to sell books. I'd like to know too, if anybody has found any social media strategies or just quirky, unusual ways of promoting books during this time. Anybody jump in, but I'm curious to know, and I think our audience would like to know too, what are some maybe ways that authors haven't promoted books in the past that we could think about doing now that everybody's stuck at home and hungry for content? Anybody?
Well, yeah, it's Lindsay. One thing that I've kind of always done was use Instagram to help me sell books and promote my books. So, and one of the rules of Instagram, be engaged, be authentic, be real, which I try to do. I talk about loving coffee and wanting to take naps and having 2 boys, and I kind of incorporate that into my posts and, of course, my books. So I'm just like open and honest about who I am and my life and my books and my journey as an author. And then another thing is partnering with different influencers. So, and not even people that have thousands and thousands or millions of followers. That's can get really expensive and blah, blah. But, I targeted a lot of accounts that mom accounts and Bookstagram accounts, and so I would reach out to them and just say, hey, like I really like, can I send you a book? Would you post about this on your page? And here's my link. And I would just send them a book and sign it. And I think I got a lot of sales that way because it's a genuine, real person. Maybe she had 1,000 followers, 500 followers, but those followers are her friends and people who are engaged. So I think that really helped, finding people who are authentic, and not just like, oh, here I'm selling this, oh, and now here's a book, and that kind, so people who actually have like real engaged followers. So I've been using Instagram a lot, Facebook, friends and family, that kind of thing helps me. I do have a Elle Berry Books Facebook page. So I do and then I'm trying to get better at Twitter, but I definitely, for me, Instagram has been sort of my like sweet spot. And then, like I said, partnering with micro influencers to get the word out about the books.
Yeah, I love that idea of partnering with influencers. That's such a good idea. And they don't have to be influencers that have 1 million followers. They just have to be an influencer who's has an authentic voice and has real engagement with their community. So that's a great idea. Anybody else? Ted, I know you did some videos. You're a musician. Have you ever thought of writing an original song about Kay?
You know, I've written songs for other musicians, like when I did a reading with Kristen Miaras Young and Noe Alvarez. I wrote songs for both of them. I don't feel it in myself to write a song about Kay for some reason. And that is, you know, to be quite honest, that I think we're trying to be positive here, but that's one of the things that has certainly hurt me, because I mean, I would be playing music somewhere live at least probably every weekend, at least 3 times a month, you know, to, you know, decent sized crowds. I mean, like, you know, 30 people, sometimes more, sometimes 15 people. But anyway, that is kind of part of the plan to always have those books with us, you know. So that's definitely something that I'm hoping to pick up as we move forward. So I haven't found a way necessarily to fill that void yet, you know, to be completely honest. So yeah, I think there are ways. You know, I've tried to do things like I've put some music to some slideshows while I was, you know, as background music while I'm reading the book. Those didn't get a ton of hits on Facebook. The thing that for me that got the most hits were my sort of silly videos. I just don't know how many more of those I can do. You know, there's only so many of those that, you know, will last.
Okay. Allison, how about you? Have you had any success doing any kind of like different sorts of marketing and during the pandemic?
This is sort of what I've been doing the whole time, but it works, and I don't see this changing because of the pandemic. I make a point to reach out to educators. My background is in education. I work at a college. And because the course listings for many colleges are online, I search for like through the English ones. And try to find classes that would match some of my stories. And I reach out to those professors, they're usually easy to find online, to see if they would be interested in, you know, teaching one of my stories or possibly the book in their class. And then I offer to, you know, come and do a visit with the class as well. And then that sort of like creates a nice little, you know, intimate thing where I'm talking with readers directly. So that's my plan for the second book as well.
And Allison, can I step in and ask a question? Are these basically cold calls or cold emails, or the people you kind of know?
I have had more success with people I know, but I have cold called some educators. I primarily write a lot of fairy tale revisions.
Yeah.
So if I notice that someone is teaching a class on fairy tales, I will reach out. And actually, right before the pandemic, this had worked. I was going to do a reading, but it got canceled because no meeting in person. So,
yeah, well, that's a cool idea, because if you can sell the idea, you might sell 27 books right there. You know.
Right. Exactly. That's
a fantastic idea. I've never thought of that before. But that's a really, really great idea. And Anita, how about you? Can you speak to any ways that any new ideas you've had for pushing your book during the pandemic? I know you spoke about speaking at professional conferences. Have you had any luck doing anything else?
I have to remember to show you the book.
Yes, absolutely.
And
smoking cigarettes, eating glass.
And so I've tried to write more blog posts and mention. The other thing is I respond to emails from people who've sort of are moved by what I've said at the conference, and I just try to make myself available as a real person who has a story that, if you want to know more about where I came from and how I got to be this way, here's what you can see. But I'm from a generation, or certainly my mother taught me, you're not supposed to talk about yourself, and you're not supposed to tell people you've got this great thing that you've done. So it's a real challenge for me to kind of go out there and say, I have this great book, but I do have people that sort of say, could you come and talk to my church group, or could you come and talk to my, what did I do? Somebody I've spoken to, I was interviewed for, by a organization that offered the interview to an intern who was very moved by my speech at the virtual conference, which I guess went all over the world.
Wow.
And so the director emailed me and said, we would, she's going to talk about your presentation, but it would make her so happy if she could actually talk to you. So I said, sure. Which was, these things are wonderful for me too. So mostly it's luck, but it seems to be working. I just always say yes. Whatever I'm asked for, I say yes.
Yes, absolutely. Saying yes to every opportunity, and also just being there for your audience when they respond to you, and just being a human being. And I think that's so important. Sorry, did somebody else want to jump in?
I'm sorry, it's Lindsay. I'm sorry. I was going to say, when she said that too, yes, just say yes. Basically, it's almost that easy, right? But also that hard. Sometimes as writers, we're a little bit, or anybody could be a little bit introverted and thinking about going out and doing something. It's like, oh my gosh, do I really have to do that? Do I have to read my book? And even me reading to kindergartners, I'm like, oh, I'm so scared. But just putting yourself out there and saying yes. I've actually gone to a lot of Girl Scout meetings of friends, can you come and read, and we can get the space badge, Journey to Constellation Station. And, it's hard because I have 2 boys at home, and it's, 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and I have to drive and go into, but I'm like, yes, of course I will do that. And there I sold 10 books, and then the word of mouth, oh, this girl comes to, Girl Scout meetings, and, blah, blah. So it's just, sometimes it's so much easier to say no and oh no, I can't do that, I can't. But it's harder to say yes, I feel sometimes, and you just have to. If you want to sell books and word of mouth, you want to get your name out there, you have to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. We have just a little bit of time for some audience questions. So if you have a question, please type it up in the chat, and we will try to get to it. Jamie had asked, could everybody do a brief synopsis in timeline form from idea to publication? So Lindsay, can you speak to that?
Sure. So I think mine was about 2 years from when I sat down to write it until the first book was published, Journey to Constellation Station. So I think it was about 2 years that I wrote it, and then I was, finding an illustrator and figuring out, what am I going to do with this, and found a publisher and got it published. So I think it was about 2 years. And then for the second book, The Backpack, a little bit less, just because I had a publisher. I kind of knew how to navigate better social media, and then we did the contest to drum up interest and to find an illustrator. So that was a little bit less time, but yeah, I think it was about 2 years.
Okay, great. Allison, how about you? Can you tell us briefly your journey to publication?
Yeah, for the first book, it's a short story collection. So the first story was written in my undergrad, and then 8 years later, it became a book. And that was essentially, I was shopping it around to different contests, and I won the Santa Fe Writers Project one in 2015. And then about 2 years later, I think in 2017, it was finalized for publication. Oh, more to the steps. I'm not quite sure what you mean by more to the steps to publication, Jamie.
I think, I wonder, Jamie, if you're asking about the actual process of getting a book published. The one thing that we didn't speak about, SFWP being a small press, they have a reading period every year during which they take unsolicited manuscripts. So you just, if you have a book, you just email it to them, and then they will read it and consider it for publication. They also run a contest, which I believe the next contest is coming up early 2021. But traditionally, you would get an agent. An agent would, either accept your manuscript or not. The agent would then submit it to an editor who works for a publisher, and then if the editor and the publisher agree, then they would publish your book, and then you can have a book. So those are the actual steps. Ted, can you speak a little bit about your journey to publication from idea to finished product?
Oh yeah, I'll try to be real quick. Started writing a novel when I was living in China in winter of 2013. Worked on it off and on. I had a full-time job. I was in 2 bands, and so off and on for 5 years or so. Sent it to Santa Fe Writers Project, not as a contest, but totally over the transom in 2018, and then got accepted and right around Christmas 2018, and then it was about a year and a half after that to publication in May of 2020, and that involved, so there was no agent involved. There was an editing stage with a woman named Melanie, who was great. So it was kind of, for me, it was sort of light editing. It wasn't a ton of revision or anything like that. And yeah, drinking with the cover, all that kind of stuff. I was told that my timeline was rather fast, a year and a half, and that surprised me. I was like, wow. So it does take a time to get that book actually born.
Yes, it definitely takes a really long time. And there, yeah, in addition to, you have developmental edits, which is like making sure that your story is good and your characters are growing and all that. Then once that's done, you have layout and cover design, like we've mentioned. Then you have copy edits, so making sure all your commas are in the right place. My book has some light sprinkling of Latin in it, and I actually just got in touch with a Latin teacher recently to check over it, and it turns out it's all wrong. I never took Latin. I don't know why I thought like I could just sprinkle Latin in my book, like I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I have to fix that. And then you get a printed copy of your book, which is called a galley, and then you send the galley out to your blurbers. And hopefully they will say like, this is an amazing book, says Stephen King, you should buy it. And then those same galleys go to reviewers, and that's where like Entertainment Weekly says this is like the funniest book all summer. And then that process takes, I don't know, 6-9 months, a year. And then finally the book comes out. And then you throw a big party. But yeah, that's a little bit also about the timeline. Anita, can you speak to briefly your journey from idea to publication?
I'll do my best. The idea, in 2001, I read my hospital records. I was a screwed up teenager, and there's a whole lot of drama about that. But I had lost memory of my childhood. But when I read the records in 2001, it came back and I relived it. So wow. In 2003, I knew that I would survive and that I had to tell people what happened. Because meanwhile, I was an experienced, I'd spent 20 years as a therapist, and I was still going to work and treating people, which actually helped get me through. So in 2003, I wrote my first paragraph. I went to a writer's conference, was told I had the chops to tell a story and a story to tell, and to go to writers' conferences. So essentially, I did it backwards from what you've been doing. I had to learn to become a writer to tell the story that I felt had to be told. So it took me 10 years. And I did have an agent. I finished the first draft of the book. Eventually she said it wasn't working. Then I got another agent. But actually, before anything happened there, it was the Santa Fe Writers Project contest that gave me in 2013.
You know, I'd just like to step in and mention, for the benefit of Jaime or Jamie, who's chatting, that, you know, this is my first book, but it's really book number 3. It's at least the 3rd book that I've written, you know, so the story that Anita's telling and that I'm telling you is that it can often take a long time, and you will fail, or not necessarily fail, but you might not get published. You know, you'll write and write. And I don't know if, Allison, if you've had, you know, similar war stories, you know.
Yep.
You have to really, really be stubborn and dedicated and determined and tough. Take rejection well.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I can speak just briefly about my journey. I had the idea for my book, Mona at Sea, in 2011. I'd never written a book. I'd never even taken a writing class before. And I was like, I was staying home raising my daughter, who was a baby at the time. And I was like, well, I'll write a book. Sure. We'll see where this goes. Mm-hmm. And then I gave myself 5 years to write it, and I finished it, and I sent it off to agents in 2015, and I got an agent right away. I was really excited, and I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I made it. And the agent sent it around to editors, and first time around, everybody loved it and nobody picked it up. And second time around, everybody loved it and nobody picked it up. And it ended up going around to about 45 editors, and everyone said it's hilarious, but we can't figure out how to market it. And so, so my agent, you know, just kind of sent me that email that was like, I just don't think I have any more places I can send this to, so I'm very sorry. And then she ended up leaving the profession to be a writer herself, which that happens a lot too. There's a ton of churn through the publishing industry. Anyway, so I didn't give up on it. I just kept sending it out a little bit here and there to small presses. I entered it into the 2019 Santa Fe Writers Project contest. Just thinking like, oh, it would be cool if I got an honorable mention or something. And then it ended up making the long list and then the short list, and then it was a finalist, and I didn't win. But the publisher, Andrew, sent me an email, and he was like, you know, I really want to publish this book. I love it. And I was like, and so, yeah, it's going to come out over 10 years, slightly over 10 years from when I had the idea and first started writing it. And, you know, I came close and it just didn't work, and it came close and it just didn't work. And so finally it's here. But yeah, like everybody else said, you've got to, you can't give up. And if you really believe in it, just, you know, keep knocking on those doors, because eventually one of them is going to open. So.
And one thing too is if you're on Twitter, they have pitch wars. So I know I did in the beginning, it's PB pitch, but so it's picture book pitch. And I remember when I first started out, you know, tweet what your book is about. You can add an image if it's a picture book. And if someone likes it, an editor or an agent, if they heart it, then they tell you how to contact them. And I think I got 1 heart, and I was so excited. And I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm on the bestseller list. I got a heart. So excited. And then they said, oh, you know, good job. I sent them the book, good job, but, you know, not for us. But I was also like, they actually wrote me back. Oh my gosh, you know. So it's also like, don't get discouraged. But they also have, you know, regular. So it's pitchwars.org. So they have, I think, 4 different times throughout the year. They have it on Twitter where you put out your book and, you know, you pitch it, and if someone hearts it, you can then, you know, take a step further. But just, you know, and then there's also things like how do I make a great pitch and that kind of thing. But so don't just think it has to be, you know, sending emails or sending out hard copies. Like there's other ways that people have made to get it out there. So Pitch Wars is one thing, and it's on Twitter.
Yes, yeah, Pitch Wars is huge, especially if you do any kind of genre fiction, like fantasy, sci-fi. If you do YA, middle grade, I've definitely seen people get book deals off of that. So that's a huge resource, and it's a huge way to just get right in front of an agent. Pitch Wars, PITCHWARS. Okay, and it's 1 o'clock and we're out of time. And I just want to thank my panelists again so much. Can everybody please, I'm going to go through one by one. Can you just hold up your books? Lindsay Berry is the author of Journey to Constellation Station and The Backpack. Ted O'Connell is the author of K, a novel, which just came out this year. A. Balaskovitz is the author of Magic for Unlucky Girls, a collection of 14 dark fairy tales. And Anita Perez Sawyer is the author of Smoking Cigarettes, Eating Glass, a memoir of triumph over mental illness. All available at sfwp.com. Thank you again for coming, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks everyone.
Artomatic too. Thank you, Artomatic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you all.
Good to see you too.
Thank you all. Thanks, Elizabeth, Anita,
Good to see you
Ted,
all.
Allison, and Lindsay, and Lanette for interpreting. The workshop is now ended and the room is closed. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you at more Artomatic 20th anniversary events. I'll put up the virtual tip jar if you want to contribute, but have a great weekend.
All money goes to
Thank you,
Elizabeth for organizing it, as far as I'm concerned.
I would be
All
interested.
$7.
Oh, I have 4 published.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, I didn't know
Good
that.
sound.
That's cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye.